We are
Hey
live.
everyone.
We're live.
What's up, Brian?
Welcome
What's up,
to
Sammy?
episode number 6. How's everybody
Howdy,
doing today?
guys.
I know, right? A couple days behind schedule, but we're still here this week. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yep, running it on a
Definitely.
Friday.
Everybody's
Another
got
very
their.
interesting week, right?
Oh, always is. Always something going on, or multiple things going on in this case, right? I think we have a good amount
Oh,
to
yeah.
talk about.
Yeah, some interesting stuff that came along. It was definitely not a quiet week for the industry. So,
Yeah, so the first one on our list there was talking about the cybersecurity firm Qualys and kind of what happened there. I gotta say, I'm I'm impressed that they had segmentation, something that we talk about from time to
Yeah,
time in the environment, so it didn't get back past their DMZ zone that they had this tool in, and it was really used from a customer service and support aspect, if you will, to transfer files back and forth. Not saying that those aren't sensitive
right.
or that there's not important data and stuff inside of it, but their code base wasn't breached. They didn't have other things that they've determined so far impacted. So from that perspective, I gotta say, hey, A plus on that to actually having some segregation in place on that.
right.
Yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, we've seen, a lot worse, right? Even just this week alone. So I think to your point, Brian, those kind of good practices, as you always call them, right? And segmentation, we talk about a lot. All these things kind of really add up and build that layered security, and help keep things separate and secure. And this could have been obviously a lot worse or things like that. So it's really minimal in the grand scheme of cybersecurity events and whatnot.
Yeah, and it is interesting just kind of seeing the pattern here that we're seeing now. Attacks towards not like third-party vendors, software, so more towards the supply chain. I mean,
Hmm.
this is the second kind of large supply chain attack, not just the second, but probably the of notable of recent, notable and recent, recently. And I think this was one that honestly just kind of shows that targeting the supply chain actually makes the threats actors' job much easier because they can gain access to multiple victims that way. And again, I just think this is going to be a popular strategy moving forward, is the targeting of third-party vendors and softwares. So, but like you said, Brian, and having that proper segmentation can help, mitigate that. They were still able to get access to some metadata in some of the MySQL database, but ultimately, overall, yeah, this is probably something we're not going to stop seeing into the near future.
Totally agree.
Yep. Just going to keep getting worse. I think I read an article the other day that like 0.05% of cyber criminals are actually caught compared to like bank robbers, right? So it's a whole different aspect there that, still, I guess, a blue ocean, if you will, that
Mhm.
can pretty much do
Yeah.
cybercrime and get away with it today. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
it'll
kind of true. Yeah,
change.
It's
because
easier to rob somebody online than it is rob a bank, right? I mean, just hold somebody
Yeah.
from ransomware. I mean, we're kind of getting into kind of early tax season now, so you're going to see a ton of those calls come out. It's my favorite time of year. IRS calls you. Everybody's got a warrant for your arrest. Go down to Walmart and go pay your bonds via, gift cards, right? It's crazy.
and it's
Oh yeah.
tough, right? Because it's hard to find from a legal perspective, it's hard to find actionable evidence against a lot of these actors, and especially when they operate in groups. How do you identify who the
Right.
individual or few individuals are that are brains of this operation, and they're distributed? Trying to gather evidence for all these individuals can be a rather complex task. So to your point, it's if you have the skills, you have the resources, it's tough to get caught. The ramifications can be high, but
Mhm.
at the same time, the reward for a lot of these threat actors is worth it. And you're seeing that from especially a lot of foreign threats. So yeah, something. I'm as a professional myself. I'm very excited to see how this evolves into the future. But our best practices are getting better, so hopefully that makes it a lot easier to catch some of these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a good Darknet Diaries about LinkedIn and the attack that happened there, where the developer had a MacBook that wasn't a personal issued one that had a web server on it, and it talked all the way through how they caught the person. It's a really good one. It was released this week on Darknet Diaries. about that.
Nice.
But it walked through the whole thing. The case actually went to trial. And that the cool part about it going to trial is you actually got all of the legal documentations and briefings and all of that stuff that you wouldn't normally get, because a lot of times
Right.
these things settle outside of court. So it was interesting to see how much data came out on that particular breach and how they caught the person at the end of the day.
That's pretty cool. Lots of new laws and regulations are going to come out, which I think actually was kind of one of the topics you wanted to bring up, Brian, about Virginia and kind of passing some new, CPA protection type acts as well, right?
Exactly. So it's the second one to pass in the United States. I guess for me personally, something that kind of drives me nuts is that we'll end up with 50 different laws, right? Versus an overarching federal type of law. So it's got to be difficult to do business
Yeah.
from that perspective. I know that there's thresholds that they got to spend so many dollars or have so many of that state's data and all that before the thresholds hit, etc. But it's going to get more and more difficult, because we also see Utah coming up. If they haven't passed it already, it was estimated to pass this week as well. But this law, I guess, comes in a little softer, if you will, than the California law when it comes from the ability for individuals to go and sue the tech companies,
Right.
like California has. So that's one interesting aspect. The other one is that they're going with an opt-out strategy versus an opt-in type of methodology. So my cell phone provider, whoever they are, happened to come out and say that now you have to go in and opt out of everything from a marketing standpoint, where no matter what your settings were before, all that's wiped out and gone.
Right.
And you got to go back in and redo that. So it's just kind of interesting to watch how these things play out and how companies are going to respond and react to them. I know in California, there's now like a governing board that's out proactively looking for violators of the CCPA, where I figured
Yeah.
originally it was going to turn out to be probably just going out and turning into some lawsuits and testing the law to see what parts of it are going to apply or not when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think you're going to see more states follow suit, right? To your point, it's people are kind of starting to really understand the privacy and data and like what that really means to them, and asking questions about it. So whether it's the state level or even just like at the application levels, now people are reading, hey, what are the really terms of service here, and like what can you sell, what can't you sell, which I think is great. I mean, people need to be aware of what they're offering or giving up, and I think to your point, looking at it from opt-in versus opt-out is really like a business strategy, right? And like what you want to kind of do, and some people might like one way and some might like the other from the business side of things, but as a consumer, they probably want to say, hey, I don't want anything unless I specifically ask for it, kind of thing. So yeah, I think you're going to see more states kind of follow suit before it becomes a federally mandated or kind of driven directive, if you will. But it's going to get there for sure. It's just going to take time, is my guess.
Yeah, it's surprising to see that this is only the second state to successfully pass a bill like this. Of course, there's a lot of criticism over the bill, but I think overall it's a baby step in the right direction. It's nice to see some legislation that gives consumers more control over their data and makes mishandling an actual consequence. Hopefully this kind of sets a standard or at least an example moving forward. And I think it was in 2018 that California passed theirs, 2021 for Virginia. So, hopefully we see some kind of, a logarithmic, growth with this kind of thing. And eventually, much like the previous Consumer Data Privacy Act, hopefully it trends quickly.
Yeah, I guess the other thing too is that companies could just make a blanket statement and say whatever the strictest law is what will just apply
Right.
to all people. So I guess looking at the other side of the coin is maybe it does help all consumers at the end of the day, that they get more choice in what data is collected on them and the right to be forgotten type of things, and then correcting data that's wrong. Right. I think that's important as well. Has anybody ever gone in and downloaded one of their gone and made a request to download all their data from a provider? I was blown away when I did it for Facebook. It was like 10, 12 gigabytes of data they had on me.
It's probably terrifying actually to look through and see what like they really do have, right? People don't
Yeah.
realize that. It's crazy.
Well,
Data
hey,
is the new money.
when it's free, exactly. They gotta monetize it somehow.
You're paying for
Right.
something. Nothing's free.
It's the trade-off, right? All right, moving on. So the QR code scams, that's probably a huge increase, right? I can think of various different restaurants now with not handing out menus and things like that as one example of that.
Mhm.
They're pretty much
Yeah.
everywhere. I mean, absolutely everywhere. Like meters, restaurants are huge now. I mean, anything you do is like QR code. I mean, QR codes become like so mainstream. Like like my parents are using them now. And like they don't, just it's just normal to them, right? And it's funny because I would always use QR codes as an example, like doing briefings and talking to people about how dangerous they are, and then the U.S. and other countries basically just said, "Hey, everybody, click this thing and scan it, and like just hit the button." Like it's teaching the most insecure cyber policy and posture you can do, but we have to adapt with what we're dealing with and with COVID and everything. But yeah, from a security standpoint, it still freaks me out, like having to see all the stuff or have it run through.
Yeah, and it's such an easy one to execute because you're exploiting kind of a trust layer that's already established. Like for example, when I think of QR scams, my favorite ones like the you guys know the birds that they have like in downtown, the scooters that you can
Yeah,
scan and unlock. Well, the first thing when you unlock those scooters after scanning the QR code is it asks you to make a payment. So if you already have this expectation that you're going to be entering your credit card details
right.
after scanning this QR code, and you're a sophisticated fisher who can create, a landing page that looks very similar to what you would be entering your data into, I mean, that's something that can happen on a massive scale because you can just paste these on all kinds of different scooters or whatever not autonomous, but electric vehicles around the city, and at least some percentage of people are going to fall for this thing. And that's a very, very low effort attack. That's pretty easy to execute. And there's no real awareness around QR codes. It's something that's only increased because of the touch-free nature of COVID and the use of touch-free technologies. So yep, I think it's something that's probably going to be pretty prevalent moving forward because I don't think touch-free technologies are going away. So it's something we're probably going to have to start organizing security awareness around and courses around, and just to understand the implications of those types of scans. And of course, all of the on that note, you should still use MFA, right, to help avoid any kind of phishing attacks that involve QR scans. You should not trust emails from unknown senders. A lot of the different things that you would kind of apply towards phishing, you would kind of apply towards QR scanning. So, but it's just a little bit of a different game, and it's interesting to see it kind of make a comeback like this because it's not technically new technology. It's been around, but the use of it is quite extensive now.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think about maybe UPC switching that used to happen inside stores, right? So you go to the big box store and somebody would switch out the UPC code for something that was less expensive. So they might go buy that Nintendo Switch, but they put the Super Mario one on there or something, and they pay the $59 for the video game, and they walked out the store with it. Well, same kind of concept here, just change to the QR code because it would be so easy to just give them bad ideas away, but sticking that QR code right on top of the existing one, you don't even think about it, right?
It's literally a sticker. I mean, you can just like any restaurant now you go to either has it on the table. It says "Scan me here" for a menu, and like some even do payment now. So to your point, Sammy, you could have a fake, menu/banking website. It's like, oh, I'm gonna pay my bill. It's enter your credit card, and poof, like it's going to be very
no offense,
wild.
Those current systems, they look fishy anyways.
Oh yeah,
like you go pull them up on your phone, and it's like the image isn't lined up, and the wording's misspelled. And I get it; they were rushing to try to get all their menu up there and going. But
yeah,
I mean, it just you got to think twice about it. But it is different too, because if you think about it, I think this stuff will be here to stay for a long term because now you don't have to have the credit card be handed over to somebody to entrust them to go and swipe the card. Because I know,
Yeah.
like, when I went to Canada several times in the last couple of years, they bring the machine to you and you put the card in and it reads the chip. The credit card never leaves you, right? So the
Oh,
waiter or
interesting.
waitress never touches the credit card in that scenario. So it stopped all the swiping
Yeah.
of the cards and duplicating them. So,
Yeah.
maybe this is the way to skip forward from that altogether and just have it right there on the app, but still having some security wrapped around those QR codes. Like,
Yeah.
one pizza restaurant chain, you can go in and they've got the app, and then you can pay your bill right from your app,
Hmm.
right? So you don't have to scan the code. They check you in or whatever from that. So it's just a different way of thinking about it to get the same outcome, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
So I guess moving on to our Microsoft attack. This is a pretty big one that's popped out this week, and it's already being exploited on top
Yeah.
of that. So it's such a
Mhm.
critical reason why you got to stay on top of it. I think, I posted a little video earlier this week, but one of the things that I kind of brought up is a lot of people don't realize that they still have an on-premise Exchange server, right? And so when
Yeah.
they switched to hybrid mode and they went to Office 365, that was something that they deployed, and then they kind of stick it off to the side and they forget about it. And it's something that they don't consider as critical, but would be in this case, for sure.
Yeah, they see it as like, it's like, oh, it's a server, but it's not really my email server. It's in the cloud. But to your point, it becomes a critical aspect of managing, your hybrid deployment if you go that route. So in this case, yeah, it was, potential for risk. So a lot of people, I mean, Microsoft is probably, the world's #1 email provider behind the scenes, and I can't imagine how much email they really see, right? I mean, it's a lot. So it was a pretty big deal. I mean, for a lot of customers and people that we talked to, it was, hey, be mindful of this, be aware of it. Let's get things patched and, have something in place here. Because to your point, it was like, I think it was basically four vulnerabilities,
Yep.
all pretty critical. And I give Microsoft credit for really kind of doing what they did, and very good detail around it, good indicators of compromise. The patching got out pretty quickly and timely. So it's just really, alerting people to say, hey, like, go and do this. Like, this is a pretty big deal because, email is super critical, right? If you can go through and pull data, create accounts. I think some of it was privilege escalation. So, creating new accounts, domain admin type stuff, that's always terrifying. So this is a pretty significant deal. And it's a pretty, big platform to kind of go after because it's so popular.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I know, same if you want to get into like how the web shell kind of works, and like, they could exfiltrate the entire mailbox if they wanted to.
Right. Yeah. So there are really 4 different components to it. So, and if you want to go read about the CVEs themselves, you certainly can. Microsoft has released a blog and on the topic, and they have these CVEs up there. But basically, you'd have kind of a chain of exploits that allowed you to authenticate to the server. Once you bypass authentication, you could potentially either write files to the system. You can actually, in one exploit, run arbitrary code on this as system on the server, so thereby turning it into a foothold into the network. And again, there was a lot of aspects to this that really, I know that a lot of people want to stop at kind of the email aspect to it, but again, the system itself, if placed in a high criticality zone within your network, could really just be the initial foothold to a much larger attack, and that's something that I kind of want to emphasize here. And so once they've managed to gain that access, it's just a matter of staying evasive and pivoting to the network. One of the things I kind of found interesting, however, is the people that the group that they suspect behind the attack isn't a group that would typically, is a group generally known for espionage and not really for this type of attack. So at least that to what Microsoft has published research about thus far. So it's curious to see the nature of the attack and why, and it makes you wonder as to why this kind of group, Hafnium, as I think they are dubbed, why they would be going after this kind of system as opposed to the things that they're usually focused on, which are like defense contractors, NGOs, policy think tanks, law firms, But again, and to that point, the impact of this is quite large. I know that at the city of Prague and Czech Republic, I think Labor Ministry, both reported that they potentially were breached by this. Nothing confirmed, but there's a high probability. FireEye had mentioned that at least one of their clients was affected. And then I know U.S. defense contractors have also said they are impacted. So again, quite a large scale, quite a technical attack. I think it's peculiar seeing this kind of chain attack being leveraged so readily in the wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see more of these, right? I mean, I think kind of SolarWinds was the first kind of part of this, and then now we're seeing some other kind of 0 days come out, and I do think we're going to see more of these types of systems trying to be compromised because they're so, like you said, deep in the network, and usually kind of left alone. It's like, hey, this is my email, server, quote unquote. I don't really want to mess with it because it works, kind of thing. So some people kind of ignore it. And to your point, depending where it sits, becomes a really stronghold in the network to just move around east to west and laterally and just gain other traction and take it from there. So yeah.
Yeah, I know one of the articles I read said that they were targeting a lot of U.S. defense contractors. So that brings to mind the whole CMMC model and really trying to help mature cybersecurity overall, right? So I understand that people can follow all the NIST standards and all of that, but really it's bringing in another level of accountability, right, with the CMMC. So it's not just trusting and saying, yep, we're NIST certified or whatever. It's having an auditor come in and help take a look at that to validate that the processes are there and they're mature, right? You don't just create a process 2 weeks ago and then get certified.
Yeah.
Type of methodology. So I think that's another big piece of the pie here is really looking at how are we evolving and going to help change cybersecurity overall, because these things are just going to get worse and worse as the days go on.
Yeah, you can bring up a good point, right? I mean, you can't just like set a policy and like, okay, I checked the box, I'm good. Like your business change, your applications change, people you partner with change, so they have to constantly be updated and matured, and not just stuck in a file cabinet somewhere and pulled out once a year to say, yeah, here it is, blow the dust off, right? You have to really kind of do what you say and kind of act on it. I think you're absolutely right on that one.
Yeah, shameless plug for TG Secure Pro being a continuous model.
Right. Always updating, always scanning, always checking.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you will respond at a federal level, just because I believe this operation was launched from within the U.S. On U.S. VPSs, and so and as well as the previous supply chain attack with SolarWinds. So I'm just curious how that's going to impact any kind of legislation moving forward. The fact that both of these were launched from within the United States, and that actually helped them evade detection quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a good point. You're kind of like hiding in plain sight, right? I mean, everyone kind of thinks to look, oh, if it's outside or it comes from certain regions, you want to flag it. But it's kind of like if someone's already inside your home versus trying to knock on your door and it's someone you trust, like, oh, it's the, AT&T guy or whoever coming to fix something, you might be more trusting than someone randomly trying to sell you something, right? So it's kind of, I think to your point, playing on the, human aspect as well.
Right.
Yeah, I know Kevin Mandia from FireEye, the CEO over there. He's been very vocal on a lot of different shows from CNBC. I think he did a 60 Minutes thing not long ago, etc. But I mean, one of the things that he brings up that we don't really do today is a whole attack back type of methodology, right? So, that's one way to. It's controversial to some degree, right? To be able to do that, but it's another way to let the adversary know it's not okay what you're going to do, and we're going to come after you with some type of repercussion, right? It's a whole different type of a war game, if you will,
from
that perspective.
It gets into a whole different level of legislation and lawmaking, and I mean, to your point, I mean, people are, they can see the appeal, like, hey, I want to kind of retaliate or go back after something, but on the other hand, that could open up a whole nother can of worms on the other side too. So it's very, very interesting to look at it from, not just technology, but, political and everything else as well. So
Yeah, I think if you, just my personal opinion on it is, if you do attack back, you're asking for it, right? So you
right.
better be prepared for that consequence.
Yeah, it's kind of like challenging you. Like, what was that like? I double dog dare you or triple dog dare you from Christmas Story and all that. It's kind of like that, right?
Right.
You better be ready.
Yeah. I'm not going to street race Derek. I will lose, guaranteed.
We'll see. That's funny. So I think our last one we had was kind of rolling into the SolarWinds, right? Sounds like we've seen a few more variants kind of come out from the SolarWinds attack, and just recent more information coming out about it, right?
Yeah.
So
I
what,
mean,
Sunburst, Teardrop, and Sunspot so far?
yep. And now we got Goldmax, Goldfinder, and Cbot, which are the three new variants. And basically, Sun Shuttle, which I believe is the initial. Yep, that was the initial foothold. As a Golang based malware that basically acts as like a command and control server, establishes a connection and then does so anonymously or evasively. So yeah, basically this backdoor is quite sophisticated, and it actually differs from the previously known tools and attack patterns they've used, which speaks a little bit to their sophistication, but also speaks to where there are multiple threat actors involved or multiple groups involved. Because at every stage of the attack, they seem to demonstrate a deep knowledge of specific tools and deployments and security softwares. And as a result, the attacks itself were highly tailored toward each of organization that it was executed in. So they blended in well, and as a result, it made this thing a lot more evasive. So yeah, it's crazy to see this thing envelop and see how many pieces of. So, and actually, by the way, to that point, they detected this all the way back in October. So it just shows you how long they've been working on the different phases of this attack.
It's crazy. I know that the Google Go platform was used for programming in that Goldmax one. So I think it's kind of shed the light on some of the newer programming languages that might be a little easier for newer people to come in and utilize, if you will, and a different way of doing it, right?
Yeah, I think you're probably going to see even more things come out on this, right, and other variants and other tooling. And I think Sammy, you brought up a good point. Is how specific and detailed kind of each of these are, and they kind of vary in certain degrees, but they have a very niche kind of attack pattern they're going after, kind of footprint, if you will, targeting different things. So it's like you said, it's extremely sophisticated, and like you said, maybe there is multiple kind of groups involved, and how this is all kind of signature with their technology and their craft, if you will. So it's still going to be kind of ongoing and coming out for, I think, quite as long as we can see more variants and other details around this whole initial supply chain attack from SolarWinds.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Cool. Well,
So
guys, I
any
think
parting thoughts?
I think we're getting close on our time. Exciting week as always, right? I mean, turn the news on one day, and we have everyone kind of helping scramble to get taken care of on a few of these things. So yeah, I'm excited to see what next week brings. I'm sure we'll have a lot more content for you on episode 7, and just want to say, hey, if you guys like the content, please subscribe, like us, post, reshare. Yeah, click that subscribe button somewhere. Yeah, shameless plug on this. So yeah, I mean, looking forward to the next one, gentlemen. Brian, Sammy, anything on your end?
No, just keep microsegmentation top of mind when you're looking at deploying applications and anything that's external facing. Get that plug in there.
Yeah, but we'll keep bringing them supply chain attacks for you guys, and then we'll have endless amounts to talk about. So thank you,
always
industry hackers.
Content.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
All
All
right.
right. Well, have a great weekend. See you guys next time.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.